Let's begin this journey of exalting, of magnifying Romans 8:28, tied it in with the second chapter of 1 Thessalonians, starting from the 17th through the 19th verses. Let us tie this in. This great leader begins in verse 17. And notice I call him a great leader. In verse 17, apologizing. This great leader begins in verse 17 apologizing for his absence and the absence of his partner. But also in there, he was letting them know that they were involuntarily, in the 17th verse, if you read that class, against their will. Don't care what the accusers are saying. The accusers will not stop until it's over. Don't care what the accusers is saying. They were involuntarily cast out of Thessalonica. It was against their will. This is what the 17th verse says, if you read it. We were taken from you. We were forced out. We didn't leave willingly. We was forced out. Because of the rage of the persecutors. Because of the rage of the persecutors. In verse 17 it says, even his bodily absence was but for a short time. You're going to hear me stop and say this quite often. Romans 8:28. Even his body absent was but for a short time. He earnestly desired to see them again. According to verse 17, it says, to see your face with great joy. I did not leave voluntarily. And then even in my absence, you were not out of my heart. Said this because his absence would be for a short time. But it ended up being a long time. This is where the learnt come with this here wise saying. Men of business are not masters of their own time. There are things that they desire to do, but because of circumstances, issues, situations, they cannot do. But that did not steal, according to verse 17, that did not rob him of having a strong desire. Did you read that in verse 17? A strong desire to be with them. In verse 18, he tells them that he was hindered. He was hindered. The accusers will not stop. If he loved you, he will return. If he cared about you, he will come back. Well, he sent word through this letter that he was hindered from returning to them, and that he made more than one effort. More than once he had made an effort to return to them. If you look at verse 17, he was demonstrating to them that he had an eager, fervent, strong desire to be with them. More than once, but he was hindered. Not only did this great leader apologize, but this great leader was hindered. Even though, and it was through the persecutors, even though the persecutors were men, he saw who the enemy really was. Satan opposed us, he said. If you read verse 18, Satan opposed us because he is a constant enemy to the work of God. So, he is a constant enemy. You might as well go ahead and accept that. You might as well go ahead and get used to that. He is a constant enemy of the work of God. Now, this is where, as he began to advance in his apostolic learning, he comes up with this teaching in the book of Ephesians. And I'm just going to quote a little verse of it. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood. The enemy is constantly an enemy of the work of God. He does all he can to cut off the work of God. But we're going to magnify Romans 8:28. Verse 19. He assures them of his affection. The accusers keep on talking. The false accusers keep on lying on him. He don't love y'all. He's not concerned about y'all. He done got all he wanted from y'all. When you rich women gave him that money, when you poor men gave him y'all living, and when you slaves reached in there and gave him of what you didn't have, that's all he wanted. No, verse 19, he assures them of his affection. If you read verse 19, for them, though he was not able as yet to be present with them, they were his hope. They were his joy. They were his crown. They were his glory. The Lord wants us to know that these are expressions of great and dear affection. These are expressions of great and dear high value. He valued those saints. The apostle puts the Thessalonians in mind that though he could not come to them, he yet wanted to comfort them. Though he was hindered, the teaching about the coming of the Messiah is a fact. The Lord Jesus Christ will come, and he will not be hindered. Now, this is what Romans 8 and 28 say. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. We magnify, we glorify this one verse. He is coming. Now, the reason why we do this, for the scholars, the teachers, the learned of the Holy Bible, states that they believe that this was Paul's first letter. Now, I want you to listen to this. That this was Paul's first letter to the Christian churches. And it all came about, listen to how it came about. And it all came about because of the opposing force of the enemy. Remember, he let them know that more than once he tried to get to them. That was what he wanted to do. He wanted to see them face to face. But the will of the Lord was different. The Lord had another plan. Because of the opposing force of the enemy, he meant to stop Paul. But God used Paul. Because of the opposing force of the enemy, Paul couldn't get there face to face, eyeball to eyeball. So that forced him to go and pick up a pen, get some paper, and start writing. And out of what the enemy did, Apostle Paul wrote the half of the New Testament Bible. He wrote about 10 letters. All this came about because the enemy opposed him. The enemy thought that he was stopping him, and all he did was augment him, enable him to do better, enable him to do more. He wrote about 10 letters that made up the New Testament Bible, and they credit Paul to write the book of Hebrews, because the book of Hebrews does not have a printed author. But they say that as you read that book, it sounds and it's written and its doctrines sound like the learning and the thoughts of Apostle Paul. So at least 10 or 11 letters are credited to him, which is still circulating in so many ways today. Look at Romans 8:28. It did not feel good to Paul because of his great love for Christ and his followers. Satan was hindering, but it was working out for his good, because in the midst of the enemy's attack, love for God and his people was demonstrated. In the midst of the enemy's attack, the call of God on his life was manifested. In the midst of the enemy's attack, the good of God completed. And what was that? The writing, the increasing of the writing of the Bible. Basic information before leaving earth. Now, I'm asking you because I did. Read Genesis 50 and the 20th verse. Read Genesis 50 and the 20th verse. The devil will never stop God, because God is always ahead. Now, this is a bye week. This is a bye week We will not be coming together again till March the 22nd. We're going to give you what they would call a spring break. But we want you that while you're going through your bye week to read chapter 3 of 1 Thessalonians. Chapter 3, the first through the fifth verses. The first through the fifth verses. And let the key verse be the second verse. Be established, be comfort. Let the key verse be the second verse. We ask that you would do this. We magnify Romans 8:28. Remember, whatever the enemy is doing in your life, God is going to cause it to work out for the good. Because he's trying to stop you from loving God. He's trying to stop you from feeling God's good purpose. But in his attempt, all he is doing is assisting you. Assisting you. Ain't God a good God? May God bless you. May God keep you. Please enjoy this little time off. I love you much.